Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a beer, it's time for some Path of Exile discussion. So today is the start of 3.17 spoiler season. All I've got to cover today in terms of actual news is one divination card. The way that the spoiler season tends to work is that GGG will dribble out small amounts of information that will build up to somewhat of a crescendo towards the end of week 2 of the spoiler season. The end of week 2 of spoiler season comes out with a bang when they do a live stream on Twitch, which I will be rebroadcasting, which will have an enormous amount of information about the new league. Up until that point though, so this is day 1, days 1 through 11 will be small pieces of information dribbled out. But for those of us that are enfranchised players, it can be really interesting dissecting little pieces of news that you might not otherwise notice if they were all dumped at once. So with that in mind, today all we got was one divination card, but it's a pretty interesting one. I want to start by saying that some divination cards are made for trade leagues, some divination cards are made for solo self-found, and rarely do the two groups intersect. This is no exception. This is a divination card that is going to be far, far, far better in trade leagues than it will be in solo self-found play. The reason for that, even though you can probably compile a set of this in SSF, I don't expect that this will be a particularly hard card to compile a set of. You're going to get a high variance outcome from it. And high variance outcomes are somewhat disappointing in SSF. Most of the time you'll get something your character can't use, and then it just ends up being this waste. In a trade league, if let's say that I turn in a set of this card hoping to see a minions 12, so a 12 passive minion cluster duel, and then I end up getting something that's awesome but not awesome for me. Let's say that that is a chaos resistance small cluster with 3 passives. So I've got something that's awesome, but that's completely useless for me. If I'm in a trade league, I can just go and trade that to someone else. In SSF, that's not an option. And as a result, this card is going to be a disappointment there. So what are you going to get here? You're going to get a cluster duel. There are 3 categories of cluster duel, obviously, small, medium, and large. And once you've got one, it will then have a random number of passives. So if it rolls a small, it'll be 2 or 3 passives. If it rolls a medium, it'll be 4, 5, or 6. And if it rolls a large, it'll be 8, 9, 10, 11, or 12. I see no reason to speculate that this will be any different to just the normal rarity distribution of all of these in the game. Once you have your divination card set and you turn it in, what are you hoping to see? Well, because this is item level 84, that's interesting. That opens up a number of new possibilities because there is a mod that can roll on item level 84 and up cluster duels only. It's a pretty rare mod and it's called Powerful. This mod causes all of the effects of small passives to be increased in magnitude by 35%. There is also a 25% version of this mod that can be rolled on any cluster duel. That mod tends to be disappointing. The one that you want is the 35% one. And so this mod is something that then empowers a lot of cluster duel crafts you otherwise wouldn't consider. So take, for instance, a cluster duel that has 3 passives. Small passives grant 12% chaos resistance. If you can roll this tier 1 35% increase mod, and you can also roll a suffix of the Lost, I believe it's called, the top tier chaos resistance, you can wind up getting a cluster duel that provides you with 81% chaos resistance. And this is just a 2 mod item at the moment. So all you've got is the prefix Powerful and the suffix, which is tier 1 chaos resistant. It might be of Exile, it might be of the Lost, I can't remember the name of it. Then you can regal it and get something else added onto it, and potentially even exalt it to get a 4th mod on top of that, and make an absolute monster of a duel. So this means that item level 84 clusters don't necessarily need to have the minimum number of passives on them to be useful. In fact, at the time that I'm recording this video, in 3.16, the most valuable cluster duels that you can get as crafting bases are actually 12 passive minion duels, which are item level 84. And that's because people want to roll this Powerful mod. It turns out to be one of the best ways to scale minion damage at very, very, very high-end play. And the 4th most valuable is actually the budget alternative to that, which is the 11 passive minions 84 one. So the fact that it's item level 84 is really important. Now, where do item level 84 cluster duels mostly come from? If you'd asked me this question a couple of leagues ago, before Expedition, I would have said they're very rare and they mostly come from people using Cyrus Watchstones to raise the tier of a map beyond tier 16. However, that has changed. During the Expedition League itself, there were a number of ways to get them from Expedition logbooks. However, Expedition logbooks now cap at zone level 83, and that means that jewels that they drop are also item level 83. What you now get them from mostly is Simulacrum waves 21 to 30, or 20 to 30. So previously you only got one shot in the Simulacrum at level 84 joules, and that was wave 20. Now you get 11 shots if you're capable of beating the entire Simulacrum, and if you're capable of only getting, say, to wave 27, then you get 8 shots at it. This means that the Simulacrum is the main place that item level 84 cluster jewels now drop in the game, with the Cyrus Watchstones being a less significant second case. So this is going to step a little bit on the loot that comes out of the Simulacrum, but the Simulacrum still has its big uniques. So the premium voices at the very top, the good versions of split personality and the like. There's still plenty of stuff that comes out of the Simulacrum that will keep that content appealing to run. Ultimately, I think that this is going to be a bit of a crafting puzzle. I really like divination cards that grant a crafting puzzle. They will give you a crafting base that is too good not to use, but that is also maybe not exactly what you were looking for, and then it's up to you. Do you then go and on-sell it to someone else, or do you try to craft something that someone may be likely to want? I also think that this card, if it drops as a tile set drop, it will be pretty appealing to chase. Price-wise, I think this card is going to be somewhere around a Divine Orb in trade, and that's because there's a lot of variance in it. A lot of the cluster jewel outcomes that you get from it are pretty good, like they're something that people do genuinely want, but they're also something that tends to be a bit oversupplied, and they can often be in the 5 to 10 chaos range. However, there's a couple of really good outcomes that will be in the few exalts range, and for that reason, I think that this card will probably be in the 10 to 15 chaos range per card all league. And that's because the good outcomes will just not be all that rare from it. So yeah, that's all I've really got on this card. If you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlobs have interesting results, and maybe with this new divination card, you'll have more access to high-level cluster jewels, and maybe you'll be Varling more of them as a result.